to deal with are your relationships with your kids. I can tell you by the end of your homeschool career, you will see how little academics play into the success of your actual homeschool journey. The need to prioritize your relationships should trump the academics. It's so easy to push aside the drama and to focus on the math or focus on the writing, or focus on the history or requirements for graduation or whatever it is that you are struggling with or working through in this season of homeschool. It's really easy to shove the relationship part aside. But I'm going to tell you from this side of homeschool that there's nothing more important than a solid foundation and relationship with your kids, especially through the middle years in between those really young years and the time that they leave the nest. You want your relationships to be rock solid. Now, this is easier on paper than in reality because I'm a flesh and blood person, prone to good moods and not so good moods. And my kids are exactly the same way. When the hormones start to fly, your kids need you more, in my opinion, than they did when they were babies. They need to be able to process what's going on in their heads. They need a sounding board to help determine if they're sane or not sane, right? They need the ability to talk about it. And that the challenge is that if you are not focusing on the relationships with your kids, when the hormones hit and they go through the teens, they're going to look for other people to fill that void. In a lot of cases, that's not a bad deal, right? They find friendships and they find mentors outside of the house. This is where you need to decide as a homeschooler, what is your master homeschool goal when it comes to relationships with your kids? My younger brother believes that you raise up your kids till they're 18 and then poof, they're on their own. This is one of those things that we don't agree on. My and my husband's goal is to bring up our kids in the way they should go so that when they're adults, we can fellowship with them. We can celebrate life's victories and challenges together. But the reality is, if you don't invest in the relationships when the kids are younger, that they will find that they'll find fulfillment in other relationships. My dad used to sing me the song "The Cat's in the Cradle" when he sang all the time. I have lots of memories from music, but "Cat's in the Cradle," the idea that there'll be time later. Oh, we'll get to it later. We'll do it later. We'll play catch later. We'll visit later. Later only comes if you really lean into your relationships. Oh, God's grace is amazing, but you really want to invest in your relationships while your kids are young, while they're still under your roof. And if you need to, you push academics 100% aside and you invest in these relationships. The best example that I have of this, and I'm just looking back to see if there's any more comments. The best example that I have of this is when my youngest son was about 14. Suddenly, all of his brothers were busy doing other things, and it was just him and I. And I've talked about this a few times before. I recognized that the season that I had with him was a gift. Suddenly, there was no competition. It was just me and Stephen. And I thought, okay, get a lot of academics done, invest in this relationship with my youngest son. And I pushed academics aside, and I nicknamed that year a Tom Sawyer year. And every day we got up and we put on our shoes and we went for a walk. We spent 2 hours almost every single day walking. We would walk. We live close to the seashore. We'd walk to the seashore. We would talk along the way, and we would look for treasures and we'd come back. He didn't get a lot of academics done that year. We spent a lot of time talking about what he was listening to because he digests literature through audiobook. We did art projects together. We did watercolors. It's a fantastic book. We watercolored every Friday where we would brew tea or whatever, and then we would follow the tutorial inside. This is a fantastic, Dana Fox, fantastic. We did watercolors, we did clay, and honestly, just really leaned into connecting with his heart. And I can see what a gift that was. When he got older, he merged into completing high school at the local community college. And we had such a rock solid foundation in our relationship then that it gave me the launching pad to actually be an effective coach for him academically when he was ready for those things. His education did not miss anything because we pushed academics aside. So I would recommend that if you're having any relational speed bumps, to focus in on those relationships and make sure that you're reaching your kids' hearts, because it doesn't matter how much they know if they don't know that you care, right? So you need to be there. So routines, relationships. This next thing, another common complaint's the wrong word, but it's the thing that resonates with a lot of homeschoolers. The first one is hands down routine. When to get up in the morning, how long to spend with math, when do you fit in writing, should you do history, writing, art, science, and basket weaving all on the same Tuesday, those types of things. People really struggle with that. But this one, anxiety is so prevalent. You are not alone if you feel anxious, if you feel like I'm going to mess up my kids forever. They're going to look back when they're 40 and they're going to say, it's all your fault. No, they're not. Anxiety is lying to you that you have to complete all of these lessons and do all of these things in order to effectively educate your children. And there is something in there that you also cannot afford to ignore your anxious thoughts either, because what you mull about in your head, what you let take up residence in your heart, is going to ooze out in your relationships, in your routines, and it's going to bleed into and infect your child's education. So you want to make sure that your anxiety is in check. And the way that you can do that is to look at your life in a factual way. If your routines are out of control and you're not getting along with your kids, you're feeling anxious because your routines are out of control and you are not getting along with your kids. Well, there are things that you can do. You can start working on your routines. You can start leaning into your relationships, and you're not ignoring anxiety, but you're taking a page from it and saying, okay, my feelings are telling me that something's not right. You have to remember that the logical process of your brain that creates plans and can think in a black and white kind of way is behind the feeling wall. So you're going to feel it first before you can make a plan. So if you feel anxious, you're like, I'm not doing enough. Then it'll get to the planning side of your brain and you'll say, okay, something's making me feel like something's out of balance. And now you can attack that. This is where your mentors come in, because a mentor can look at you and say, ooh, I can see this from a mile away. You are so opposite on your time scale. There's no way that you're going to be able to have a proper routine unless you tighten that up. And that makes sense. That mentor can also tell you, and it's okay if it takes 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to get that part of your life under control. So anxiety comes in different forms. It comes in feeling like nothing is in control, feeling like you're hurting your kids' education, or you're not connecting enough with their hearts. Listen to what it is that makes your heart hurt a little bit and get help. or purposely set aside school to deal with the things that are making you anxious. It's not the feeling is a symptom of the side of your brain that's saying, hey, there's something over here that needs your attention. So, routines, relationships, anxiety. The next thing is dead and boring. So, before I go on, I'm just going to look, make sure there's no questions, which there are not. The other part, after you've dealt with your routines, you've dealt with your relationships, you've acknowledged that you have anxious thoughts, and you start to prepare a plan, hopefully with help from somebody that's a little bit further down the road than you are. We need to address the dead and boring. If your kids can already read and they already know their basic numbers, and we hand them curriculum that means nothing to them, they look at that and everything's gonna hit the fan. Kids know when they're being pacified and they don't like it. If you handed me a big old book, I grabbed this big book this morning that I thought, oh, I'm going to read that. And I started to look through it. I'm like, no, I'm not. It's not hitting my heart.